Today we have a ton of news out of FCA, most specifically the Dodge division of FCA. We're going to dive into the Charger and the Challenger now. If you want to know about the Durango, that's going to be in a separate video. Now, unfortunately, I'll get the worst news out of the way right up front, and that is that we do not have a new Charger or a new Challenger. Instead, FCA is doubling down on the batshit crazy that has made these models just so great over the last few years. So instead of just having a just over 700 horsepower, for instance, Charger or Challenger, we now have the new 2020 Challenger SRT Superstock. This is going to be the world's quickest and most powerful muscle car according to Dodge. They're claiming that they've retweaked the 6.2-liter supercharged V8 yet again to give us 807 horsepower. They're claiming this is going to be good for a 0 to 60 time of 3.25 seconds, quarter-mile time of 10.5 seconds at 131 miles an hour, and a tire-limited top speed of 168 miles an hour. Now, this is combined with the wide body that we see on the Challenger as well. So that means that we get the 315 with tires all the way around, 315 40R18 Nitto tires. They're drag radials on all four corners. To help stop the insanity should you need to, there are going to be 4-piston Brembo brake calipers and 14.2-inch vented rotors. We also have a performance-tuned limited slip differential in the back with a 3.09 final drive ratio. And Dodge tells us that there, of course, going to be some drive modes here. We have track mode with the SRT drive mode switch that has a revised shock tuning specific for the drag radials. A lot of folks don't realize it, but it's actually pretty difficult to get a two-wheel drive car to go 0 to 60 in 3.25 seconds and have quarter-mile times like we're talking about here. And it requires more than just a lot of power under the hood. It requires a lot of material science going on to make sure that you can actually give this thing a new car warranty and have it not grenade itself after just one run down the racetrack. And it also requires a lot of really complicated software to help the vehicle apply that much power to the ground. And that's why they're talking about revised shock tuning in order to help get you that 0 to 60 time that they're quoting here. What's interesting here, of course, is that this is kind of sort of a demon here. Now, head of global Alfa Romeo and passenger car brands, Tim Kuniskis, said, I quote-unquote swore that I would never build another demon, and we won't. So basically, instead, they just decided to kind of sort of call it the Challenger SRT Superstock. According to the press release, the SRT engineers say that they have increased the shift points from 6,300 RPM up to 6,400 RPM, so it revs a little bit higher there. And it's tuned to deliver 807 horsepower on regular pump gas, which is interesting. Obviously, very, very premium regular pump gas, but that's still a 10 horsepower boost over the Hellcat Redeye, and we get 707 pound-feet of torque. I touched on the suspension earlier, but let's talk about what the software supposedly does to enable these absolutely crazy 0 to 60 times. So we have the pretty typical street modes. We have a comfort drive mode where you can have a sort of soft suspension driving out there on your regular commute. But when track mode is pressed, this is what we get the option for. It says that the front shocks are set for firm compression and soft rebound damping. Rear Bilstein shocks are set for firm compression and firm rebound damping. This configuration is maintained as long as the car runs at wide open throttle. When the driver backs off on the gas pedal, the system switches to soft compression and firm rebound front and rear for improved handling. And of course, it's a slightly better comfort down there at the far end, of course, of the quarter-mile drag strip. During track mode, the traction control system is disabled to enable the rear wheels to spin for a burnout, but the electronic stability control system remains engaged in order to help give you that straight line performance. They're using all the electronic nannies possible to try and keep you in a straight line as they're attempting to give you these crazy numbers here. We have recalibrated 8-speed automatic transmission. It's the same ZF1 that we find in a wide variety of high-performance vehicles out there, including something like the Lamborghini SUV of all things. The electric steering assist system is optimized for more straight-line performance, and of course the cabin cooling is diverted to the SRT chiller, which pre-cools the air for the intake. All these systems work together with different modes that are user accessible, for instance, launch control and launch assist. Launch assist is a little bit different than launch control, but it's along the same veins. It's primarily there to try and reduce wheel hop. When you've got this much power and torque spinning on just two wheels in the rear, you can end up with the rear suspension hopping up and down as the tires gain and then lose grip. This can cause damage to driveline components, and so this system, rather than just simply backing off power completely or using some other traction control methods to try and associate it, it sort of gently rolls off the throttle and rolls it back on so that way you can keep your foot planted. Obviously, we have launch control, we have line lock, we have their race cooldown feature, all that sort of stuff, and of course that SRT pre-chiller that we were talking about. And this is, interestingly enough, going to be a 2020 Challenger, not a 2021 Challenger. And that takes us along to the 2021 news here, which is that we are getting a Hellcat Redeye version of the Dodge Charger. So just in case the Hellcat wasn't powerful enough for you, now there is an even crazier version of the four-door sedan. And just for good measure, they've also dialed the knob up a little bit on the regular Hellcat. So if 707 horsepower wasn't enough for you before, you get an extra 10 horsepower for 2021. I think some folks out there will be a little bit disappointed if you got the Daytona edition of the Charger Hellcat, then that had 717 horsepower last year. But now everybody's going to get that as the baseline in the Hellcat lineup, and you can get a 797 horsepower Charger. They're claiming that this is the fastest and most powerful mass-produced sedan in the world. 707 horsepower, top speed of 203 miles an hour, which is a little bit higher than that drag racing Challenger. And surprisingly enough, the quarter-mile times are not too far off either. 10.6 seconds is what they're claiming on this at 129 miles an hour. Those are absolutely insane numbers. They're also claiming it'll run faster around a road course than the regular SRT Hellcat, of course. Now, you'd expect that with all that extra power. Now, here we don't find the same wide tires that we find on the Challenger. They're still pretty wide, 305, 35 ZR20 tires, but they're not 315, so they are a little bit narrower. Obviously, still the same sort of wide body thing going on. We have a video on the wide body Charger up on the channel. A lot of folks out there give the Charger a hard time because they think that it handles poorly, and that's not really accurate. As I've said before, the deal here is that when you take a look at an E63 or an M5 or any of those super fast sports luxury sedans out there, those manufacturers have decided to crank the acceleration up to 10 and they've cranked the handling up to 10. And with the Charger, they cranked the handling up to 10 because honestly, in skid pad tests, the Charger Hellcat wide body handles nearly as well as an E63 or an M5, depending on the versions that we're talking about here. The problem is that they've also cranked the power way up through the roof to like 14, and they haven't cranked the handling up to that same level. So it's not like we get supercar-like grip in the corners or on a skid pad. We get absolutely excellent grip on the skid pad, but we also get mind-blowing 0 to 60 times, and that amount of power to the rear wheels only can overwhelm the rear wheels, obviously, in anything. But that's sort of half the fun of the Hellcats. It's that raw power, and obviously they're taking us to an all-new and even crazier place for 2021. Now, rather unfortunately, again, no interior changes. So the interior is exactly the same as the Charger and the Challenger that we've covered here before. I really wish Dodge would do at least something to the interior of the Challenger. I think the Charger has aged okay, but the Challenger is starting to look just a little bit too nouveau retro, I guess you'd say. The interior is not a bad place to be, and it's very comfortable. It just doesn't seem as new or as fresh as the interiors that we see, even the Camaro or the Mustang, which are definitely newer than the Challenger. Now, obviously, FCA is saying, why should we bother doing that when these two guys are the best sellers in their segments most month? The Charger outsells everything really in its segment, and it outsells models that have been redesigned and refreshed way more recently than it. And the Challenger is, generally speaking, outselling the Camaro and outselling the Mustang every now and then as well. And just as you might expect, a big reason for that, of course, are these absolutely crazy models. Now, we don't have pricing information on these guys exactly yet, but we do know some of the feature content, and that's going to be up on Dodge's website if you want to know exactly which features you get on which model. Now, I'm not exactly clear when I'll be able to get my hands on one of these guys for our usual drive review. However, I suspect I'll probably be able to do that before the end of the year. I'm particularly interested in the 797 horsepower Charger. I've always thought that the Charger was the more intriguing option here, shall we say, because you expect a high-performance vehicle to have two doors. You don't normally expect it to have 5 seat belts, but sure, 2 doors. But the Charger is just that next level in absolute batshit craziness. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And of course, check out our Dodge Durango video because there's some pretty big news over there, and I'll see all of you next week.